Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 1st, 2025. This is going to be a week of decisions. Very tough decisions have to be made concerning virtually every strategic battlefield in the world. I'll go through some of them, but it's important to note that these decisions are being made by leaders who have made wrong decisions over and over and over, based on the axiomatics that they carry with them. And it's important that as the world is changing, with the emergence of the global South, with the collapse of the economies of the Western world, that it's necessary for the people themselves to be heard. That means you. That means our listeners and viewers and our supporters. Take the time to study the issues, study the axioms, and join us in mobilizing to create a new strategic and development architecture. Now, the decisions are going to be on war and peace, on economic policy. Let's start with the big one. Steve Witkoff, the advisor to President Trump, will be headed to Moscow for meetings with Putin. What's at stake is where things are going to go on the situation in Ukraine. In a sense, the situation is predetermined. Ukraine is collapsing. The support for Ukraine is almost non-existent now in the United States. The Zelensky government is teetering. It's under enormous pressure due to the scandal, the corruption scandal. Zelensky's top advisor, Yermak, had to resign. The battlefield losses are mounting. The ability to build an army is collapsing. And on top of that, you have the cutoff of support from the United States. It hasn't fully happened yet, but President Trump has said he's not inclined to continue funding a war that's already lost. Now, what does that leave Zelensky with? Europe, the European three, Starmer, Macron, and Merz. Hardly three giants or leaders. And their countries are themselves quite weak and teetering. The French can't put together a government. Merz is falling in the polls, and Starmer represents nothing but a discredited city of London. Now, you have very ominous statements coming from military officials in Europe. For example, the chair of the NATO Military Command, Admiral Dragone, called on Europe to be more aggressive, more proactive in countering the so-called Russian threat. We reported on Friday the French military chief who said that France has to be more willing to fight to take on Russia, but that means more willing to sacrifice their children. That's a call to arms, and in Germany you have a similar fight, with the government having to surrender for the moment in its efforts to get mandatory registration and recruitment into the Bundeswehr, that is the German army. Now, there are no funds available in these countries, except what they can steal from Russia, which is a violation of international law. So you see the situation devolving quickly. And on top of that, you have the pending collapse of the artificial intelligence bubble, which has been propped up by the same speculators who built up the mortgage-backed securities bubble, the dot-com bubble, and so on. They believe in bubbles because they make their money from bubbles while the rest of the world suffers from them when they pop. Now, the latest, the artificial intelligence bubble, is somewhat in trouble because of the lack of electricity that's affordable throughout Europe. Given the sanctions against Russian oil and gas, the green policy, the cost of electricity has gone through the roof. And the artificial intelligence bubble depends on massive amounts of electricity for the huge data centers that they're going to support. Now, on top of that, you have the growing problem of the collapse of the machine tool sector and the auto sector in Germany. So how does an AI bubble help that? It doesn't. It siphons credit that would ordinarily go to industry into the artificial intelligence and tech bubble. Now, then you have the next major decision, Venezuela. Will Trump pull the trigger? Will he launch an attack against Maduro's government in Venezuela? Now remember, earlier this year, Tulsi Gabbard, his director of national intelligence, said, we're not doing regime change anymore. Trump came into his second term saying no more regime change. Now he's saying regime change in Venezuela. Either you go or we push you out. Are the American people ready for a war in this hemisphere? Or is it going to be a war like the so-called war on Yemen or on Iran, where we drop a few bombs, proclaim victory, and then turn around and leave? Now, the other issue in terms of the Venezuela case is Marco Rubio, aka Narco Rubio. There are rumors that he's in trouble because he's pushing these wars. He's a regime change addict, as President Trump correctly identified him in 2016 in the presidential campaign. So what's going to happen with Rubio? Is he going to get his wars? Well, let's hope not. In fact, let's make sure he doesn't. Then you've got the situation in Southwest Asia and Gaza, where Netanyahu is now asking to be pardoned without admitting guilt. This is a very questionable legal strategy, but he has Donald Trump on his side, maybe because Trump just wants him out of office. As it is, with Netanyahu in office, the Greater Israel fanatics are running the military strikes against the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, against the Lebanese to the north, against the Syrians, against the Yemen. Maybe Egypt is next. This is where you see a spreading war. For what purpose? Defending a country which claims a biblical contract to the land between the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates. Now, on this issue, there's growing infighting, including within the Make America Great Again movement in the United States, which we just saw with the resignation of Marjorie Taylor Greene over her opposition to making Israel first. And so we'll see what happens in the days ahead. But there are going to be some votes on funding, the defense budget, and so on. Where will this go? Will there be an opportunity to shift the policy to justice and international law? Or will it remain stuck with the pro-Israel policy, or I should say pro-Zionist policy of Greater Israel? Now, I just point out that there are times like this where you have rapid change. Go back to October 7th, 1988. 89, I guess. Yeah, in 1989, when Erich Honecker, the dictator of East Germany, proclaimed that his government would last for 1,000 years. And a month later, it was knocked out by protests that started at churches in Leipzig and very quickly spread to the rest of the country. A rapid change. The problem was an alternative policy was not in place. And so the people who had been running the policy previously shifted gears and said, okay, now we're going to take over. And what did they do? They looted East Germany. They looted Russia when the Soviet Union was brought down, and created the situation in which you have an expanding eastward NATO, which is behind the ongoing proxy war against Ukraine. So there can be positive regime change when it comes from the people, and not people who are being manipulated like the demonstrators in the Maidan Square or the demonstrators now in various parts of the world. But when you have people organized around a mission of peace and development. And that's what depends on where things will go, what changes will take place. And that means that your voice is significant. You, as a portion of the population which knows something about the crisis and knows the alternatives, must step forward when the leaders are weak or confused or on the wrong side. So I would urge you to follow our videos on our website to stay ahead of the events. Make sure that you subscribe to the Executive Intelligence Review Daily. and share our videos and share our material with your friends. We have to have a competent, serious leadership in the West. It's not going to come from the Democrats and Republicans or Labor or Tories or the Macron party or the CDU in Germany. It has to come as an authentic voice of change from the people. That's your job to help make this week of decision. Ensure that the